Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 569, I Reckon When I Count at All. Now, this poem is one of the most referenced poems in the Sewell biography. He calls it her, quote, clearest, most composed statement of the function of the poet. Notice the line here in this poem, so I write, poets all. When this poem was first published, it found its way to the Atlantic Monthly of February 1929, which does make some sense given that publication and given the fact that Emily Dickinson will become known as one of the greatest poets that ever lived. Certainly I'm making that argument again and again in our study together. What does Emily have to say about the value of poetry, poetics, and of course more particularly the poet herself? And it isn't clear because Emily never tells us exactly the moment when she decided, okay, this is it, I'm going to do this thing. In other words, we don't have directly the kind of statement that we have from Walt Whitman in Song of Myself, Passage 1, when he says that all of a sudden I've decided at 37 I'm going to do this thing for the rest of my life. We've given full lectures on all of the poetry of Leaves of Grass at learnstrong.net as well. We call that series Talks with Walt. Now, speaking of LearnStrong, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff there at learnstrong.net. Hopefully you worked through our set of introductory comments as well as the preceding 568 poems. We just finished with 568. We learned the whole of love. Now, in many ways, we're coming back to many poems we've already studied. For example, we're coming back to 195. For this accepted breath, through it compete with death. The fellow cannot touch this crown, by it my title take. Ah, what a royal sake to my necessity stooped down. No wilderness can be where this attendeth me, no desert new, no fear of frost to come, haunt the perennial bloom, but certain June. Get Gabriel to tell the royal syllable. Get saints with new unsteady tongue to say what trance below most like their glory show, fit as the crown. And you guys remember when we did 448, this was a poet. It is that distills amazing sense from ordinary meanings and matter so immense from the familiar species that perished by the door. We wonder it was not ourselves arrested it before. Of pictures, the disclosure, the poet, it is he, entitles us by contrast to ceaseless poverty. Of portions so unconscious the robbing could not harm, himself to him a fortune, exterior to time. Now, I want you to pay attention to Emily's, what one scholar has called her hierarchy of cherished things, the things that matter in her life. I also want you to pay attention to the symbolism of this poem. Notice that here we'll see sun, celebrating, of course, the idea of light, borrowing, obviously, from Plato in our study of Republic, especially 7. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. Her idea of summer as being a miracle, that is to say, related to beauty and fruitfulness. In many ways, okay, you can write this down, some scholars have seen this as Emily's most blasphemous poem. That is to say, her most Promethean, defiant, middle finger to divinity and all of that kind of stuff. And that will lead us, of course, to Percy Bysshe Shelley, and that will lead us to Shelley's defense of poetry. And we'll have to obviously talk more about that in a bit as well. In many ways, I think this is Emily's response to Dante. I've told you guys that Milton and Dante and Shakespeare are always seemingly standing right behind much of the poetry of Emily Dickinson. If you would ask Emily who are the greatest poets, she would have said, right, Dante, Shakespeare, and Milton, right? She would have said easily, I mean, there aren't any poets any greater than that. And yet, in some powerful way, she almost seems like Dante at the beginning of the Divine Commedia. She wants to be included in that canon of great poets. Let's see what she has to say. I reckon when I count it all, first poets, then the sun, then summer, then the heaven of God, and then the list is done. But looking back, the first so seems to comprehend the whole. The others look a needless show. So I write, poets, all. Their summer lasts a solid year. They can't afford a sun the east would deem extravagant. And if the further heaven be beautiful as they prepare for those who worship them, it is too difficult a grace to justify the dream. Now, one of the reasons we pick up a poem like this after we've read all the preceding 568 poems, is so we can get a sense of, oh no, there's all kinds of echoes that we are hearing in a poem like this from our earlier readings and study of Emily. One of the problems with a poem like this is it's often lifted to demonstrate Emily's love of poets and poetry and the like. But if you haven't read much of Emily's stuff, you have a tendency to miss so much of the games that she's playing. You'll remember reckon from our study of poem 63 and 128. When we get to poem 826, she'll play the game again with this word reckon. I can't help but think of John's valediction forbidding mourning, men reckon what it did in men. And when we get to 826, she'll say it this way: love reckons by itself alone, as large as I relate the sun to one who never felt it blaze. Itself is all the like it has. The word reckon is almost like a mathematical or an accounting term. In other words, if I want to sit down and count the things that matter to me, her contemporary Thoreau and Walden will of course call it the essential things of life, as he said it in his study of Walden. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. She says, I reckon when I count it all. In other words, I don't give much thought to this, is her point, right? But if I have to put the things of greatest value, the first thing I'm going to put is a poet. Now that's interesting, but then notice the use of the dash. First, dash. Poets, dash. Then the sun, dash. In other words, okay, so yeah, I'll admit the sun is important. Oh, you're going to admit that. Oh, good. I'm glad you're going to admit that. Then she goes, well, okay, after the sun, the best part of the year is the summer. Why? Because we have sunshine all the time, right? And all of us as students go, well, yeah, the best time of the year is summer because I don't got to be at school, theoretically, right? Notice dash. By the way, summer will take us back to poem 302, right? Then, the heaven of God. I'm sorry, what did you just say? You said that when you consider the most important values of your life, the first one is poets, the second one is the sun and summer, and then the last one is God's heaven? The heaven of God. And then she says, the list is done. In other words, that's all I need. Give me poets, give me the sun and summer, and give me God's heaven, and I'll be just fine. You can sense the very Promethean language here, right? The very defiant language here, right? But now she's going to rethink. In other words, that could be enough for a poem of Emily's, but no, she's going to come back now and go, but let me think about this a little bit more. Let me reckon a little bit more. Let me do a little bit more mathematics computation. And then, looking back, the first note is capitalized. So seems to comprehend the whole. The others look a needless show. So I write, dash, poets, capitalized, dash, all capitalized, dash. Whoa! So just pay attention to what you just read. She goes, if I think about it, the most important stuff in my life, and for anybody's life, is poets, the sun and summer, and of course God's heaven. But now that I start to think about it, I don't know that I need any more of the list than the very first one, because look at it again. What is it that poets do? They comprehend the whole. What an amazing, right? What an amazing. By the way, just go back to poem 568. We learned the whole of love. Now, all of a sudden, notice how one poem helps you read another poem of Emily's. Instead of the we being Sue, or a possible lover of Emily's, all of a sudden we go, oh, she's talking about poets. Poets learn the whole of love, because that's what they do. In other words, they understand or comprehend the whole. They don't have to worry about the parts. And then she says, all the other stuff? Of course, what's the other stuff? Sun, summer, and God's heaven. Look like a needless show. Right? Notice the blasphemous quality of this. We've seen this before with Emily. Why would I die and go to a heaven when I can make heaven right here, right now? Very interesting. And she says, this is what poets do. They comprehend everything. So I write, dash, poets, dash, all, dash. By the way, when we get to 772, I love this line. I keep quoting it for you guys because her use of the word all, she'll say it there in 772. All is the price of all. It may be the mantra of all mantras for poets, right? All is the price of all. And then what does she say about poets? Well, here you go. You ready? She's going to reinvent all the other stuff she just said. Sun, summer, and heaven's, God's heaven. First, poets. Their summer lasts a solid year. In other words, there's never a time for a poet when they're not in summer. Now, obviously, she's speaking metaphorically, right? In other words, perpetual summer. Why? Because they can afford a sun, right? Notice the use of the word afford as it reckons with the word reckon. In other words, if you're an accountant and you're doing your computations, yeah, we can afford the sun. The East would deem extravagant. In other words, poets don't need any more than the words they're working with. That's all they need. Phooey on sun, because we have summer all along, all the time, right? The East would deem extravagant. In other words, unneeded. And, now we're going to get to the last of her list. If the further heaven, obviously we're playing games here. We'll pick this up again, this heaven, when we get to 575. When we get to 575, heaven has different signs to me. Sometimes I think that noon is but a symbol of the place. And when again at dawn a mighty look runs around the world and settles in the hills in awe. If it should be like that upon the ignorance steals. And then she continues with the orchard. When we get to poem 959, we'll play similar games with this further heaven. In other words, she's speculating about what it's like to die and go to heaven. And she says, poets are okay to just stay right where they're at. Why? Because they don't need anything. They don't need any other show. They don't need an extended or a further heaven. And if the further heaven be beautiful as they prepare, by the way, the word they is probably really our word it. Emily loves to do this where she has a collective pronoun for a singular. For heaven, in other words, prepare. For those who worship them, as in worship it. In other words, there are people who devote their whole lives to getting ready for the afterlife. To the poets, though, she says, it is too difficult a grace. Now, is she saying there's not enough evidence of heaven for her or the poets to believe in it? Poets are, by definition, more skeptical. This is what she's saying? To justify the dream. Now, the dream here is capitalized. Some have called it her flood subject. Of course, we've referenced that phrase. Immortality, in other words, and the idea that what happens after you die and all of those questions. I can't help but read the word justify and think of our study of Republic, Plato's Republic. Book 10, passage 617, the responsibility is with the chooser. Plato says God is justified. Well, Emily's making her choice, it seems. And her choice is what? To be a poet. All capitalized, A-L-L. Now, there's so many poems that we would want to come back to in our study of this poem. You may want to write these down, and as we come to them, we'll remind ourselves of 569. We'll see resonances of this in 617, in 1382, in 1247, in 1651. When we get to 959, we'll play this game. I'll do 1651 just because it's so powerful. A word made flesh is seldom and tremblingly partook, nor then perhaps reported. But have I not mistook? Each one of us has tasted with ecstasies of stealth the very food debated to our specific strength. A word that breathes distinctly has not the power to die. Cohesive as the spirit, it may expire. If he made flesh and dwelt among us, could condescension be like this constant consent of language, this loved philology? And again, when we get to 959, she'll say it this way. A loss of something ever felt I, the first that I could recollect, bereft I was of what I knew not. Too young that any should suspect a mourner walked among the children. I, notwithstanding, went about as one bemoaning, O dominion itself, the only prince cast out. Elder, today a session wiser, and fainter too, as witness is, I find myself still softly searching for my delinquent palaces. And a suspicion, like a finger, touches my forehead now and then, that I am looking oppositely for the sight of the kingdom of heaven. Emily, the iconoclast, no doubt about it. Now, what are we going to say about a poem like this at 2:8? What are messages here? I think our argument is that nothing is more important than the poet, because they comprehend the whole. At 2b, I love what one scholar has called the playful exaggeration here. Although, notice there is a serious ending to this poem, however you read it. I can't help but think of Sir Walter Raleigh's What is Our Life? A play of passion, our mirth, the music of division, our mother's wounds, the tiring houses be, where we are dressed for this short comedy. You'll remember how that poem ends, though, from jest to more seriousness. Thus march we playing to our latest rest. Only we die in earth, that's no jest. I noticed that Emily is playing a similar game here. She starts out kind of like childlike, exaggerated, like making a bit of funny. But by the end of it, she says, you know what? Poets decide they don't need an afterlife. They got the life they need. It's called being a poet. It's all they need. The similar poems, we've listed them already. Obviously, Shelley's defensive poetry comes to mind. I think Dante's Divine Comedy is standing behind a bunch of this as well. And that is to say, to try and explain the whole. I mean, think of it one more time. What is Dante if he doesn't comprehend the whole? What is Milton if he doesn't comprehend the whole? What is Shakespeare if he doesn't comprehend the whole? And then finally we'll say it. What is Emily if she doesn't comprehend the whole? I mean, guys, we're already now coming up close to poem 600. And we can see it. Her ability to just say so much in so few words is compelling. Finally, to own a poem like this, all right, guys, you got to agree or disagree. Do you think poets are the most important thing in poetry? Because poets are who comprehend the whole. Not scientists, poets. Interesting. Thank you.